Story Chat with John Fornoff, the art and passion of storytelling. Here's your host, Brian Bullabush.
Welcome to Story Chat. I'm here and Brian is not. I don't know where did Brian go? I don't know. Brian has mysteriously disappeared, our wonderful producer, but that's okay. We're gonna limp through without him. I'm going to see if I can hit the buttons in the right order. And if you're getting this, it is a miracle. So we're doing this on YouTube, of course, and you can get on Spotify, iTunes, and various other places. So welcome to Story Chat, our little corner of the universe, your corner of the internet. That's what Brian always says. This is why I need a producer. So anyway, where we encourage and inspire you, hopefully, and really that's our heart. We're here to encourage you with your writing, because we feel really story is a battle of the stories, is the battle of the heart of the culture. Comes down to a battle of stories and who has the truth. And so what you're doing is really important, and we want to share with that and just help you launch into what God's called you to do as a writer. I have a very special guest with me, as you can see. And if you're listening in audio, you can't see, but I will tell you who it is. And by the way, I'm wearing glasses. Don't be thrown off by that. This is my attempt to look intellectual, and this as far as it goes. So anyway, I've got with me, my contacts blew up. You don't need to know all that. I want to introduce you to my guest. He is Nato Jacobson. And Nato, man, you know what? I should ask you for your bio, but I already know so much about you, but there's so much probably I don't know. But Nato is an amazing actor, writer, producer, director. He does music. He does everything. And we first started working with Lamplighter Theater with Lamplighter Guild is where we first met. And he was one of the students, and I started working with him then. And then he was part of the Giant Killer. Is that right, Nato? That's right. Is where we started. And you play one of the starring roles in that. Did a fantastic job. And after that, I just hired Nato to do we've done a bunch of stuff together. How many voices? Okay, Nato, welcome to the show. Before I'm talking about you, I need to talk to you. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Story Chat.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for having me, John. It's a delight.
It's great to have you here, man. Nato and I have worked on, how many voices have you done?
Well, oh man, it's around 150 now.
That's amazing. 150 different voices he does. And just for fun, let's do a couple for them just for fun.
Yeah, sure.
If you're up for that. Okay, we practiced a little bit. But we do one for Abide. Abide is the #1 prayer and Christian meditation app out there. It's really cool. Just download on your phone. It's free. And they got a free and a subscription one. There's a free one too. And they have something on there called Skyship Dreamer. And Skyship Dreamer is a show I came up with where Captain Kadiddle has, with his dad, he refurbished this clipper ship and made it into a skyship. And it flies through the air. And by the way, it floats on the ocean too. Well, that's in the future. But anyway, it flies through the air. And Captain Kadiddle has his first mate is Jack Farthing. And so they go on all these adventures and they tell stories. That's what it is. Cargo stories. The destination is dreams. So we'll do a little bit of Captain Kadiddle, just a tiny bit, just kind of feel the fun that we have when we work together. So here we go. Hello there. I'm Captain Kadiddle, and this is my skyship, Dreamer. And there is Jack, my faithful helmsman. He's the one who steers the ship. Jack, how are you?
Hi. Doing well, Captain. Doing well.
Great to have you on board. Oh, watch. Get a little to the left. We're going to hit the mountain there, if you would.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, distracted me. Yeah, I was. I get a little hypoxic up here.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds very dangerous, Jack. We should work on that. But it's good to have you, Jack. You're my first mate, my second mate, my third mate, my coffee mate. All the mates. You do it well, Jack. And it's great to have you aboard, because without you, we would crash. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So that's Jack. And another one we did recently was we do these crazy Aesop fables. And we take Aesop's fables and we put them on steroids and do it like an audio cartoon. And we have a lot of fun. And so we did one called The Turtle and the Rabbit. Actually, it was the first one we did. Yeah. And Nato, you played Reginald the Rabbit, who is he's like a bully bunny. All right. That's right. and that's Reginald, and he challenges Tom the Turtle to a race. So let's do that one for real fun, real quick here. Okay, ready? Go for it. All right.
Hey,
So, I'm sorry. Are you talking to me?
yeah, I'm talking to you, you smelly loser.
I am not a loser. I am a turtle.
Aren't those the same thing?
Let me think about that. I will get right back to you. There we go. So anyway, just a lot of fun. Anyway, we do a lot of stuff like that. There's some more we did. We did Sir Aldred and Ondino. That was real. Oh man, that was amazing for Lifeline audio drama. But anyway, that's enough of us having fun. We just have fun. We love doing this. And one of my favorites is Captain Cadiddle and Jack, because we have a, I don't know, kind of a similar kind of relationship, Nato and I do. And recently we've been writing. Nato's working on the Adventum, which is the Bible Adventure Show. And so we've done a lot of cool stuff together. So tell me, this is all about story. And Nato, what's your passion about story? What draws you into writing? What's the thing that grabs you about writing or story?
Yeah, not even sure where to start with that, but it's a very deep-seated thing that's really just tied in, I think, with the nature of life, with the nature of meaning in a way. So like that goes really deep, but not to get ethereal or anything, but like it's really, there's a correlation between storytelling and life, and we, the two are they sort of, tie in with each other. And, there's a historical aspect to that. There's also kind of a future aspect to that, in that, I think that what's amazing about art is that it gives people a point of reference for life. And so when you go about living, you will, I think, largely view life in a sense through the lens of how you believe the story is supposed to go.
Oh, that's so well put. Yeah.
And so in other words, the story that ends up becoming your life, like the story that gets told about you after you're gone, is a big part of it too. And it's sort of you deciding what that's going to be, and that's sort of the idea of legacy, which really I'm really passionate about as well. And that not just telling stories, but thinking about it in the kind of the grand perspective of the decisions that we make in our own lives, and how stories can be a point of reference for those decisions. And I think that, like, if you look back at World War II and you saw Hitler's strategy to remove art from society, he actually understood this. I think that the fabric of a culture really is tied to its art and to its stories. And so
really well put.
If he succeeded in taking that out, what he knew was it would fall apart.
Wow, that I've never thought about that. That's amazing. A real quick, Bobette Buster, one of my favorite teachers for writing, she said, writers, you're talking about a point of reference. She said writers bring order out of the chaos. And it's like, oh wow, that's so well put, because there's a lot of chaos going on, and try to make sense. It's a point of reference. Like time they kind of give a sense of how the story should turn out, like you're saying. We have Brian with us, my producer. Hey! I feel so much better, Brian. So much.
Sorry about that. Lost track of time.
That's okay. I was hitting buttons here left and right, and Nato was praying for me. He was sweating it out. I don't know if he could do it. I hit the button though myself.
It's recording, so
right
you're
there.
good.
There we go. That's my finger in action. And I'm so very proud of myself for hitting that button. But a short-lived pride, and it's gone now. Nato, so welcome, Brian, and feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
This is Nato. Have you met Nato?
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Nice to meet you.
Meet Brian. Brian, my producer, and Brian
is
Nato. All right. So, Nato, we were talking earlier about, you said something controversial, which that's okay. We welcome that. It said out there, and I think it was, who was it? Some kind of famous movie mogul said, story is king. Story is king. And Hollywood followed suit. They said, yep, story is king. And a lot of people say, yep, you're right. As far as when it comes all down to it, its story is king. And I won't tell you whether I agree or disagree, but I know that you say something different. He dares
I know
say something different that Hollywood says. So go ahead and tell us what you think is king here.
Well, I'm going to step on a lot of toes. You know, I have a bad habit of doing this. It's like I didn't mean to, but here's the thing. You know, you have to kind of ask this question: where does story come from, right? You know, what's its source in a sense, or what is the outflow of what? And so when we talk about stories kind of like containing characters, it's like, well, is the story about those characters, you know, what's revolving around what? Are the characters the outflow of the story, or is the story an outflow of those characters? And I think it's helpful to kind of reframe our terms a bit. When we talk in terms of storytelling, we use the terms characters and audience. But I think it can help in our perspective if we switch those words out potentially and replace them with the word people. We have people and we have people, right? So if you think about it, the character is really just a person, and also that's the same is true for your audience. And when you kind of get this, you can kind of get detached from sort of, you know, what this is really all about when we're telling stories, when we use these other terms. And in my humble opinion, I believe that the nature of what we are doing is tied to people, and that basically the audience is, you know, I mean, you can sum it up in 3 words. What are they asking of you as a storyteller? 3 words: make me care. And here's the thing: the reality is that people don't actually care about what happens to other people. People care about other people. And it's very easy to sort of see this in life, in that if I were to tell you, John, I've got terrible news. 1 million people just died today. You know, you would be like, man, that's just so sad, you know, but that kind of happens every day, right? You know, but if I come to you and I tell you, John, I've got terrible news. I just found out that your daughter died today. You're going to respond a little bit differently to that. Why? Because you don't just know about that person, you know that person. And there's a world of difference between knowing about someone and knowing someone. And so the trap that storytellers often fall into is kind of getting into this mode of telling the audience about someone, but not really letting them know that person, really, which is what the character is, right? You know, it's
where you would care about them. Yeah.
And so exactly. And so we only care about what happens to them if we care about them, if we actually know them. And that's true actually of both heroes and villains. Like, in other words, you can have positive desire or negative desire as an audience member toward a character. So even if it's a villainous character, we need to know that character to the degree that we have a deep-seated negative desire to see them defeated, right? So it applies across the board. And so that's why I say character is king. Not that story isn't essential. Story is essential. It's just that it's an outflow of character. And so you have to get your starting point right.
So you think, okay, so you say story is an outflow of character. So you start with character, which is interesting. Some people say, go ahead, Brian.
I was just say, could I make a counterpoint?
Go ahead.
In order to know somebody, don't you need to know their story?
Oh, great question. So the thing is, that the two are inextricably tied together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you see this, if you witness what would be regarded as an incredible story, right? Like a great example in the film world of this is Dunkirk, right? Where a lot of people love that movie, like for various reasons.
It's one of my top 5 movies. You hit one of my
so
top 5.
It's a really incredible story. But something that you will commonly hear about it is that from audiences is that, well, we didn't really care about anybody. It was an incredible story, but we didn't really care about anybody, because you're witnessing. Nolan specifically crafted it so that you're kind of witnessing it from the outside, not really attached to any particular character. It's a portrayal of an event. And so in other words, that movie was basically like almost like a docudrama, you could say, right? Instead of a film like Saving Private Ryan, for instance, where people are like weeping at the end because of what has happened to these characters so just another World War II example, right? Where because you're actually tied to that. So if you portray a remarkable piece of story, an event, a plot, or whatever, if it's detached from character, it doesn't stick with you the same way. So like it can still accomplish a goal if your goal is maybe different from like connecting with an audience on like the heart level, right? But I guess that's sort of personally what I'm interested in doing as a storyteller. So
that's fascinating. So tell me about this, because you mentioned a phrase I haven't heard before as we were talking beforehand, and you said you used the word audience experience. And what do you mean by that, audience experience? And it sounds like, well, I'm thinking, for me, when I see that term, I'm thinking, we really need to care about what our audience experiences as they go as they're listening to our, they're experiencing our story. But tell me, what does that mean to you? What is that? What's audience experience? What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's everything. To me, like all of my decisions revolve around it, because again, it comes back to the people component, right? In other words, when you're talking storytelling, you've got people talking about people to other people or those people. It's all about people at the end of the day. And so, it's like, this would be obvious if we were talking in the business world, right? Where you're making products, like any businessman who would tell you, we're just going to make this product kind of for the sake of making it, like, if it doesn't really connect with customers, like, who cares, right? Or like, that's not the most important thing. Maybe that's not our ultimate goal. You would be like, okay, why are you in business? Like, what are you doing? Right? And the same is actually true of art. So, in other words, if the quote unquote customer, in this case, audience, are not the ultimate goal. Like if the product connecting with them is not the ultimate goal, like, what are you doing? What's the point? So when it comes to audience experience, you are crafting the journey specifically for them. And the whole idea is that you have an outcome intended for them. Right. And so really at the end of the day, my decision-making as a storyteller of how to shape this whole thing, and even to some extent, like what happens with the characters, really comes back to what's happening with my audience and the way that they're going to receive it. In other words, communication is pointless if it's not understood and if it's not received.
Well, this kind of goes back to, excuse me, real quick. I'm just thinking back to for the audience experience. Story is king versus character is king. And I'm thinking through this, and I'm wrestling with this as you're talking about audience experience, because it's like, I'm not sure where I land on that, because they're so, and you mentioned they're inextricably linked, which you say that word better than I do, and I'm working on it. I'll practice. So I'm thinking, if I meet a person, all right, if I if I don't care about that person, I'm not going to be interested in their story necessarily. But what if they have an incredible story? That incredible story might draw me into them as a person. So I'm thinking maybe story does draw me in. Maybe story is king. But then on the other hand, if going back to what I said earlier, if I don't care about the character, don't care about the person, I'm not really interested in their story necessarily, but unless they have an incredible story that draws me in. So I'm wrestling with that one. I'm still thinking through that one. Yeah. Because I do agree with you. They are linked. Well, inextricably.
To me, it's to me, it's like to make a pound cake, you need a pound of eggs, pound of sugar. I'm going somewhere with this, I promise.
Okay, good. Okay.
Pound of eggs, pound of flour, pound of sugar, and
you got to pound it all together.
Yeah. You pound it all together. Is it still a cake if you get rid of the eggs? Is it still a cake if you get rid of the flour? I think character is so much of an ingredient of story that I think it's almost unfair to say character is king over story is king. It's like saying eggs are the cake if it's just such an inextricable part of the cake. I think it's unfair to say that character is king or story is king. It's basically saying the same thing at the end of the day.
So I guess it depends. It depends on how you're defining your terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's true.
So if we're talking about the story that sort of makes up who this character is that we're meeting, like what's their backstory sort of thing. Like I would when it comes to telling a story, when I'm thinking story, I'm thinking sort of like A to Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's A, right? What's our starting point, right? It's the character is going to have a certain extent of backstory that they are bringing into this thing or whatever, right? But where you go from there, let's say more from like the sequence of events that gets portrayed to the audience with these characters, is more, I guess, sort of how I'm defining story in that if it's basically if it's like, let me give you an example. Like I've seen a lot of people make this mistake where they, in the first like 5 or 10 minutes of their story, they kill off the protagonist's parent or something like that, right?
Batman syndrome.
And and thinking, and they think that the audience is going to care that we just lost that loved one, right? And it's like, you try to go for this big emotional hit when we're just barely getting to know our protagonists. So it's just one example, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, you can do that if you want to establish that sort of piece of like what the characters, carrying into the rest of their story. But don't think that that's gonna have an emotional connection to the way the audience feels about anything because you haven't made them care yet, right?
It's a shortcut. It's an emotional shortcut.
Yeah,
that's what Paul McCusker talked about that. In fact, that's melodrama. It's emotion without earning the moment.
Yes,
it's trying to go for the emotion without earning it, and you're trying to. Oh, I know. We'll make them sad if we do this. Right. We kill off their dog. It's like that'll make them sad. It's like, but I don't even know about this guy and his dog. Yeah, that's
right.
Well, does that make all those moments bad? Is there a way to do that properly, or are you just talking mostly?
Well, I mean, it depends. It really depends, because I would actually say that if you really know what you're doing, then you could actually within 5 to 10 minutes, like if you're making a short film, for instance, we could get to the 10-minute mark and be bawling our eyes out if you really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, but in that structure, it's a different pacing that you're using. Right. So, your 2-minute mark or even less, is the equivalent of in like a feature film or audio drama or something like that, 10, 20, 30 minutes in. Right. So, it's just, it kind of depends. And by the way, just as a side note, I would highly recommend to people listening that you learn how to tell stories in short form before you try to go to long form. Learn how to tell a strong story in 5 to 10 minutes. You're not gonna be able to fit as much story in. That's really not the point. Make me care about a character in that amount of time, though, or make me care about an idea. Try a 60-second narrative commercial, advertisement or something like that, right? Like do stuff like that, because it will train you to make the most of every second that you have, right? Because you have so few of them. And then when you go to that longer form, now you're thinking, how do I make the most of every second of the long form? Instead of like these people will skip right to like feature length, this or that. And they're just burning time. Like they're just totally losing the captivation of their audience because they haven't learned how to really, captivate from start to finish,
That's a really good point. And you've done short films as well. So you're speaking out of experience. That's really good, Nato. Before we leave, a couple of things I want to hit on. One is, why did another show? Because there's so much I want to talk about, like Lord of the Rings, scriptural storytelling, all that kind of stuff with Venom. So we'll save it for another show, but I just want to wrap up this one here.
Yeah.
I want to talk about moments. What you talked about moments. What are moments and how important are moments? What's that all about?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What are moments for a storyteller? Or for an actor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really, again, it's tied to audience experience. It's really about holding their attention, keeping them engaged, captivating them, in that you, we're really, when we're telling a story, something I've said a number of times in the past is storytelling is just as much about telling as it is about story. In other words, this is another reason why I don't say story is king, is because really the same story has been told over and over and over and over again. Like, we've seen stories that are very similar to each other. We can kind of see where they're going, whatever. But what really keeps us are the characters and the way that you tell the story. It's the kind of the unique angle that you take, the unique perspective that you have as the storyteller, looking through the lens of your experience or your creativity, your imagination, whatever it is. And if so there are a lot of people who think that if I just have this kind of story, like, again, like, oh, his parents died, and then this bad thing happened, and then that bad thing happens. Like if we string together enough terrible things that happened to this person, we're just gonna we're gonna get to the end, and the audience is just gonna experience this amazing sense of redemption or forgiveness or victory or whatever, and it's like, it's really not about what happens. Like, something needs to happen, but what happens isn't as important as the way that you communicate it, right? That's what's gonna hold the audience attention. And I say that, like, after I would say, the first priority is do you care about who it's happening to, right? So like there's that, but then it's the way that you do it. It's the telling. And so so it's are you gonna find a way in these moments to like craft a moment, to where if that protagonist does lose a loved one, let's say, the way that you craft the moment is in a way that people have never really quite seen or heard it before, right? That's kind of the goal, right? So that it captivates and really means something to them and is fresh.
That's good. That's what I really like the part. Storytelling is much about the telling as much as the story itself. So it's like, wow, that's you give a lot to think about there. Well, it's been great to have you, Nato. Man, that's great. There's so much more we need to talk about. So next time we'll get together. I want to talk about Lord of the Rings. I mean, just in a short way, okay? Because one of your favorite films. Also scriptural storytelling. How do we tell story? Because you've had experience working with Adventum, and I've been working with you on that. And
Yes,
how do
sir.
you bring those stories to life? And what do you do? Those are some really cool things. So we'll talk about that next time. But Nato, thanks for being with us, man. It's been a joy. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Well,
See you
Brian,
guys.
thank you, man. Thanks for being here, and blessings to you. And we're here to encourage you with your writing, and we hope you got some really good. There's some really good stuff that Nato shared, and we hope that's going to be a blessing on your journey as a writer.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Story Chat. If you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions for John or feedback on the show, please email us at storychatwithjohn@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.